Hello, my name is Dr. John Abendanza, a member of the Optometric Extension Program Foundation Board of Directors. Welcome to the OEP Archive Podcast. This program was created by OEP to preserve and share important OEP recordings from years past. We hope that you enjoy and learn from these recordings. OEP is the organization that A.M. Skeffington created in 1928 to provide postgraduate continuing education to optometrists. If you would like to learn more about the Optometric Extension Program Foundation, including our journal, Optometry and Visual Performance, the OEP Clinical Curriculum of Courses, the OEP Store, and more, you may visit us at www.oepf.org. Thank you for listening.
Okay, so this is Nate Bonilla-Warford with episode number 2 of the OEP Archive podcast. Part 2 of A.M. Skeffington's lecture. And as I was going back and listening to this, it occurred to me how much knowledge is buried in this recording. Not only is there general wisdom about how to approach patients, but there's very detailed information about patient care. I do know that it's not necessarily easy to listen to, and maybe someday we will have the transcript and that should help. I did try to clean up the audio as much as possible from the old cassette tape which it came from, but it's actually pretty surprising how good it sounds, I think. So, without further ado, here is the rest of Skeffington's lecture.
The analytical examination is an ordered procedure based on sound psychometric principles with all the real reliability of interpretation that any table of probabilities gives any mathematician. The order of the examination led to syndromes that are the mark of a profession. In acceptance of lenses, the concept of the visual problem starts at near point was treated in a previous section. The lenses the patient accepts have their remedial value at near point. The classical concept was that lenses correct an assumed refractive error at far point. The true error at far point was thought to be revealed by the dynamic retinoscope studies of Andrew J. Cross, Edwin Forbes Tate, Charles Sheard. The modern optometric approach is to determine the lens power the patient will accept at near, and then weigh the convenience of wearing it at far. This concept, conveyed to the optometric extension program, has spurred the use of bifocals for children. The non-optometric journals also now endorse this. It evolved in optometry and was dispersed to the optometric extension program. The demand is near point. Hyperopia and exophoria have been shown to be protective processes. The need arose to find methods for learning their proper amounts at near. The crossed cylinders and their related forias provided such a method. The crossed cylinders present an artificial interval of stern. The target provides lines which permit degrees of resolution to be compared. Spheres can move the interval of stern forward or backward. In this way, they can affect the blackness of the target lines. When the lines of the target are equally clear, the best resolution has been obtained. It is just as important to learn where the patient places the target in space. The induced foria supplies this answer. Exophoria show the target as being placed away. Esophoria show this being stationed nearer. If the target placement is away, some amount of the hyperopia measured is due to this. The shift of centering away in space releases a certain amount of the total identification process, for the target is not moved in space. This portion must be subtracted from the crossed cylinder gross. The amount subtracted is known as lag of accommodation. The gross cross cylinder finding less the lag of accommodation results in the crossed cylinder net. The net, which is in effect the hyperopia at near, is a safeguard. It may be viewed as a survival function at near, just as the hyperopia of the subjective is at far. Its function is to protect the proper working of accommodation. Hyperopia at near or far is deemed an error only when it exceeds certain most useful limits as a person adapts to maintained stress. Lenses which correct the hyperopia, near or far, have value in the degree they meet the demand to localize away. Hyperopia has been observed to act as a defense or reserve. That such a reserve aids survival was shown by optometry in the late 1920s. Studies in the 30s confirmed and advanced the views that had been derived in office practice. Research in the 40s showed that hyperopia decreased under the stress of problem solving. Up to that time, problem solving had been considered a purely mental act. Its connection with vision had not been stressed, if indeed it had even been realized. Further studies in the 50s showed that hyperopia varied with the equilibrium state of the total body system, that it could be absorbed or it was expendable. Every optometrist in practice is faced with the question of how many findings are needed. He must obtain enough data to learn what the problem is and what can be done with it. The refractive status at far or 20 feet can be measured quite simply. The criterion of what lenses the patient will accept is based on the visual functioning at near point. The optometrist who thinks in terms of function is set apart by this concept from the non-optometric refractionists or the opticers of Europe. Vision, thought of in this way, is dynamic. This outline has stressed the fact that seeing is learned, that a visual problem starts at near and spreads to far. Kurt Goldstein says that an impairment in one area of a performance spreads the total performance. Man is built to meet stresses which last a short time. When it persists through time, stress brings adaptations. The analytical examination, as taught by the optometric extension program, makes it possible to learn the effects of stress. The adaptations to it affect the lenses the patient will accept. A low 16B, that is based out to break at near, does not show whether the full plus power at near will be accepted. This can only be determined when the far point ductions are also known. This outline has dealt with the continued stress as it affects optometric vision care. In office practice, the concept has been labeled embedding. The term used in this way means that the process of adaptation to the stress has gone on for a long time. Relatively fixed, emphatic changes in structure result. These changes are shown in the syndromes that direct lens application. As the first response to stress, the survival processes are absorbed. Hyperopia drops, exophoria decrease. The findings show marked changes. As a rule, the recoveries go quite low. As the process of adaptation takes place, the profile of the case in time looks more normal. At this stage, it is harder to arrive at the lenses that can be supplied with success, for they are defined by the syndromes built from the experiences of the profession. Survival skills are absorbed. Previous sections have referred to changes in the survival skills. These skills, which serve to protect the sustained visual response of the person, are expendable. The most clearly observed of these skills are hyperopia, to protect accommodation, and exophoria, to protect convergence. They undergo constant change as a result of the varied states of stress which affect the organism. Stress, as a rule, brings a transient drop in findings. The drop in the level at which the person achieves is shown on any task he attempts. The most definite research in this matter is that of V.I. Shipman, Ph.D. She made a study of the effect of stress on children. Her results were reported. They summed up in the statement that, under stress, there is a constriction of all the perceptual fields. The child observes less, sees less, remembers less, learns less, and becomes generally less efficient. Summed up, this indicates the child under stress will learn less. The book Retinoscope Findings, initiated the Clinic of Child Development at Yale University by G.N. Getman, The continued investigation of Gesell Institutes by Appel and Straff completely confirmed the earlier investigations. Finally, the studies shown in photographic form, but not yet published, by D.B. Harmon, Ph.D., at the Radiological Group at Austin, Texas, and the confirmatory studies at the Mental Health Center at Baylor University by Homer F. Weir, M.D., all confirm the fact that when the child is under stress, there is a change in retinoscope findings. These are accompanied by changes in the other findings of the analytical examination. If this fleeting first drop could be measured, 4 notable changes would be observed. 1, static retinoscope finding would be very low. 2, the crossed cylinder findings would show a marked drop. 3, exophoria far and near would show a big drop. And 4, the recoveries of all affected ductions would be very low. As stress persists through time, the changes as measured can be relied on, and then a syndrome is found. The findings that bore the first impact of the stress are the ones that become low. Function alters structure. From this emerges one of the notable lens-fitting syndromes of optometry, that of the non-embedded visual problem. This syndrome contains both far and near findings. Derived from it is the vital lens-fitting directive. The plus given for near should be in excess of the values found at the near point. The visual problem becomes embedded. It has been stated that optometry used the concept of time and stress before it had been published in many other fields. As a visual problem is prolonged, the patterns of response become embedded. The wholly altered syndrome emerges, which requires a quite changed lens-fitting approach. When this syndrome of embeddedness is found, the lens-fitting rule is to cut plus at all points, far and near. The clinical optometry course of the Optometric Extension Program discusses case samples of this type problem. Vision and the efferent processes were referred to in a previous section, and where reference is made to neurological and physiological findings from Duke Elder. It also mentions that the infant begins life with great flexibility in the visual systems. These same sections cite the limits of function the infant must learn. Recent studies in biology have shown beyond a doubt that all the senses are closed energy sequences. This is the input, integration, output, feedback sequence. Vernon said that vision developed under the tutelage of the active touch. This matter of development of vision through touch was discussed in the previous section. Man involves 2 important skills. 1, the skill of knowing where things seen is placed in relation to the total visual space world, that is, centering. 2, the ability to gather, use, and combine knowledge from present and past experiences, that is, identification. Centering is the knowledge of where things are in space. Identification, the knowledge of what things in space are. The concept of a continuum is applied. The methods outlined provide a knowledge of how the case looked in the past, what it likely will look like in the future unless proper steps are taken. It also supplies information as to what these steps should be. It allows one to understand why the exact findings of the refractive status are so often not acceptable to the patient. Data is obtained from 3 syndromes: typing, adaptation, or embedding, and spatial organization. It allows one to predict whether the patient will accept or reject the projected plus or cylindrical lenses. It also indicates when it is helpful to prescribe more or less than the value shown in the findings. The extent of the need for visual training is learned from the syndromes of embedding and spatial organization. These syndromes show whether such training can be dispensed with, when it should be advised, and when it is greatly needed. The optometrist now, for the first time, can outline a program of visual care through life. He can project this knowledge to early years and lay out for the parents a program of preventive visual care for the child. This approach lends itself to suitable vision care of children. The concept of vision as an effect or process permits one to understand the visual problem of the emmetrope. It opens great new vistas of cooperation with this country's school people. One great value is this approach creates enthusiastic patients. They are happy to come to you, for they are delighted with the results. They know you understand their problems. Your grasp of procedures rids them of problems with which they came in and let them build skills they have not had in the past. These values accrue as a result of the optometrist gaining the skills that let him understand case typing, how to apply the syndromes of embedding and spatial organization, in short, how to prescribe with success. And so, as a summary, let us say the optometrist gains from a dynamic concept of vision many things. One, he applies vision care to children from the very young through school age. Two, he learns the real visual needs of emmetrope, who, as a rule, is a retarded reader. Three, he understands the development of a visual problem. He knows what it was like 5 years ago, why it is where it is now, and what it will likely look like 5 years from now. A, if proper vision care is not given, and B, if proper vision care is given. 4, the optometrist programs vision care through life, from early childhood to the impact of age on visual performance. And 5, he understands the reasons for visual training. He knows the degree of need and can direct an effective program. The optometric extension program is well-rounded. The student who limits himself to technical aspects is depriving himself. He needs to know office management, practice building, office-centered public relations, the role of reading in optometric practice, and the professional use of contact lenses. He should have a knowledge of visual training as put forth by the optometric extension program. These, with the expanded knowledge of refraction, allow the optometrist to predict what the person's visual problem was in the past. What is found today tells what the problem will be like tomorrow. This takes the place of a slice through time, a static, fixed error with the living man left out. Here is a way to create enthusiastic patients, not just satisfied ones. Here is the means of lifting the practitioner's status and stature in the community. It brings the material rewards that give pride in accomplishment.
So by the time this is published, this podcast should have a permanent home at the Optometry and Visual Performance blog at www.ovpjournal.org as part of the Optometric Extension Program Foundation. I want to thank Mark Taub for putting the effort into making that happen. That's going to be, that's the best place and the natural home for this podcast, so that should be wonderful. Stay tuned in 2 weeks for the next episode.